Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Beattys Fly Tying Friday. Tonight, the 12th of January, you're stuck with us, and we'll be tying a couple of spruce fly patterns, and we'll be sharing a couple of tips with you. But for now, we're the Beattys from Boise, Idaho. And starting tonight is my lovely wife, Gretchen, and we should have swapped before. Let me get out of the way here. Let you get over to the work area. I'll get back in here to run the cameras.
Okay, the spruce fly is when I used to tie the spruce fly, I had no idea really what it was representing. I guess I have to admit that. But I've done some reading on it, and the spruce fly, you fish for it in the latter part of July into August. And I've looked at a lot of the patterns, and a lot of the patterns are very creamy colored. But when I looked at the pictures of spruce fly, it seemed to me they were a little darker. So I've changed the pattern a little bit to suit what I think I saw. So
Sure.
So we'll see. So here's I'm going to tie.
You've already.
As you can see, I've stayed with the peacock tail and the red body with the wire. And I've gone to a squirrel wing, and then of course peacock up under the wing, and then I put some peacock over the ends of the wing too, and that has made my hackle really stand out nice. And that is pheasant, as you'll see, that I use for the hackle. So that's kind of I played with this a lot over the last week, and this is what I've come up with, and I kind of like it. I'm tying this on a 3XL, and I'm doing a size 8. And I'm using black thread, silver wire rib, a tail of peacock fibers. The body is red floss and peacock. The floss I'm using is actually that stretchy nylon from Danville. And the wing is fox squirrel. We have a lot of fox squirrels, so I like to use it whenever I can. And then the hackle is pheasant body. And the thread.
For the head, you ready for the materials?
Yeah, so we can take a look over here, and here's the material. As you can see, this is my squirrel. Got a really nice squirrel. They were well fed from my father's walnut tree. This is my floss. Here's my peacock. This is the feather that I'm using. And interesting on these feathers, I discovered that they're not all the same, of course. Some of them had really coarse stems starting right about there. Yeah, right there. So I'm going to start my base wrap about, the 1/4 point. And I'm starting my base wrap with my stretchy nylon. I do that a lot when one of my first materials is the floss. Just that way I can only have to change threads once rather than multiple times. Try to keep that kind of smooth. Makes the wire a little easier. I'm going to get, let's say I'm doing about 3 or 4 of these. How many ever gets in my hand?
This is for the tail that you're going to put those peacock on?
This is for the tail.
Yeah, got it.
I want the tail to be about the length of the gap. So I think that's going to work about like that. Just wrap real. One of the things I've discovered about this stretchy nylon, if I really put a lot of tension on it, it narrows the fibers are closer together. if I just put the right amount of tension on, I get this spread of the fibers and it makes a really nice smooth body. So I was playing with that the other day and kind of figured that out. So now I'm going to get my wire. Cut off a chunk already, so. Now the wire, we want to start it on the back side here, because then the torque of our thread should bring it underneath, and that's where I want that to reside. Now I know a lot of people helicopter wire off. I just don't do that. For one thing, it takes me a long time to get it to work, and when you're tying commercial, you just don't take that time. So I kind of got in the habit of going as far back on my scissors as I can and just cutting it. Time when you're tying commercial is probably more important than saving a pair of scissors when you can get new blades for them. So we're going to start wrapping. And I try to get about 5, but you know, this is not an Atlantic salmon fly. So if I don't have 5, I don't fuss. Okay. Now the next thing I'm going to do is to tie some peacock on. I'm going to tie it on by the butt ends. I might be able to use that peacock that I cut off, but I'm a little uncomfortable with that. Sometimes it works and sometimes it's not quite enough. So for this part, I'm going to use fresh peacock that I just cut off. Okay. Now at this point, I need to get rid of this floss. If I tie much longer with it, I'm going to have too much bulk.
So what are you switching to?
I'm switching to black 6/0
Oh, okay.
Danville. If you just, when you start messing with the squirrel and all that. Now the squirrel is, unlike deer and elk, hair does not compact that much. And so it's really easy to get too much bulk. So I'm going to cut off 2 chunks of this and make them fairly small. Now, one of the things that I have to be really careful of is getting too much wing. I have a tendency to overdress. So I'm going to try to be really careful and make sure I don't get too much. Now, this should be about half the width of the gap. I think I'm going to take out a couple here. And I want the wing to come back about halfway of the tail or to the tail. As I looked at a lot of patterns, they were done either way. So I'm going to just a little more than halfway back. I just did that to kind of mark it because it's very difficult to cut it once you tie it on. So wrap around it. Pull that out a little bit. There's another thing about squirrel tail. It is very, very, very slick. And so what do we do with the, oh, here it is. So in order to make a really sturdy fly, I like to, on both of these, I'll just put a tiny little drop of Loctite.
It's crazy glue.
Crazy glue, I'm sorry,
Yeah,
yes.
well, yeah, that's the brand name Loctite, but it's a crazy glue.
Okay. Now I'm going to, one of the things I want to do is this, I want this wing to fan out. So before I put this second one on, I'm going to come back through here from my pull point. I should talk about that a little more. If you notice, I'm at a pull point out here. If I'm too close to this, it doesn't work right. So I'm going to come in here about halfway. And it never fails. I always cause a couple of them to stick out. But if they don't get in line pretty soon, I'll get rid of them.
Notice that opens the wing up just a little bit so that it can work in the water, because squirrel doesn't work in the water very well.
So we want this to fan like that. So now I'm going to get my second portion of wing, and I don't need too much more actually. So I'm going to make a fairly sparse amount here. Measure it. Now what I'm going to do is cut it off so it is a little bit, the butts are a little farther closer to the eye. So about like that. And hopefully that's going to make my platform for my hackle a little better. And a little bit more super glue right there on the tips. Now the key is not to get my finger in there, huh?
That's probably a good idea.
No, you want to put this lid back on, it's fine with me.
Yeah.
Okay, and I'm going to go to the pull point again, and I'm going to go through this batch. Come on, we don't want to do that. There you go. That's better. Now I'm going to just wrap around the whole thing once to keep it up off the body. Now, as you can see, I've got some cleanup to do, and it happened every time I did this the other day practicing. And I probably just need to practice that a little bit more. So there we go. It's fanned up pretty nicely. Now, another thing I'm going to do is put a little bit more peacock on. And that helps fan my hackle out a bit. So I'm going to take 3 of these butt ends that were left over from the tail material and tie those in. Well, one of them went away, so we'll just use 2. That's plenty anyway. I'm just going to wrap this just a little bit here. Just a nice full wrap of 2, or just plenty. Okay.
And while I'm looking at the chat right now, and Meg Gallagher wanted to know where this fly would be used, and I don't know in the Idaho area here, any of the streams, but we used it almost exclusively on the Yellowstone, and it was a really good fall pattern, latter summer into the fall. When we fished it as a spruce fly, we'd more dead drift it than anything, but in the fall, it was a really good pattern for pounding the banks, as we called it. You'd float the boat along the bank about 40 feet out and cast to the bank and strip 3 or 4 times, and then recast to the bank again. And that just had you continually pounding the fly into the bank. You can go ahead there.
On the Yellowstone, there's lots of times the scum line is just right on that, maybe 6-7 inches out from the bank.
Yep.
And that's lots of times right where we're casting to. Now I found with this, for some reason with this, I really don't need, I found I didn't need to fold it. So let's hope it works for me the way it did when I was practicing. See, now I've got a little bit of heavy stem right there. So I think I'm going to take a couple more chunks off. There we go. I want to get down to that finer stem. I'm going to trim this just a bit right here. I kind of like to have those ends there. Boy, that's funny. I was on the Yellowstone. I swear I was. I was just visualizing that scum line. And late in the evening, some of those pools where the fish would just, after all of the guides were through, it was great. Okay, so I'm going to just work this around as I go. And you kind of have to twist the stem and lay it how you want it. Let's back up here. Need to get my thread out of the way. Okay, here we go. It looks kind of messy, but it turns out, and I don't know why, but when I tried folding it, just didn't help at all.
Well, one of the things we found interesting about this is, I don't know about you guys, but we have not found a lot of patterns where the church window flies on the ringneck pheasant body feather was something to use. And this just blends this in with the squirrel so doggone good that we really like the way those church window feathers turn out as a hackle. I've got a brush down there too, Gretch.
Yeah, this doesn't seem to be doing the job. I like that.
Brush is right down there.
Oh, this?
Yeah, that's your mustache brush. There you go.
What I was using was my little thing with, it's a little tougher, but this will work. I want to get those all separated out. That looks pretty good, huh?
Yep.
And I'm going to start back close to the hackle and wrap forward, forward, forward. I think I'll do that again because my head is a little small.
All right. Questions?
Very nice. Thank you.
Go to the fly that's in the water. So when you look at that, I don't know that once the fly gets in the water that it's going to make a whole bunch of difference. If you look at that, the waves are just pushing that back. And because I've got peacock underneath it, it doesn't go totally flat. Pushing my hands, using my hand to pull it back. And I tried folding it, but for some reason I couldn't. It's not like folding a soft hackle.
Moving right along, everyone. We're going to now work on the. Yeah.
Yeah, some of the spruce patterns use the peacock sword for the tail.
Yeah, I know that, and we didn't have any handy, and we used what we had. It's another one of those things that make and do with what we got. Yeah, I know the original pattern calls for that, but I'm going to really go into the weeds right now when I go into the pattern that I'm going to be tying. And that was a perfect segue, Jim. I appreciate it. The segue is we're going to be tying a Spruce Fly Dry. And in keeping with the theme that we've decided to keep this year, and that is making do with the materials we got, not exactly what the pattern calls for. So you'll find a few things in this fly that would not be in the recipes. But anyway, let's just go through the recipe here real quick. Dry fly hook, black thread. The tail could be hackle fibers, could be moose, and I got a question mark. It could be whatever. And in fact, I had a couple earlier that had fibers from what do you call them, makeup brushes? Anyway, they make really, really good tails. The wire is optional. I'm going to be using wire from a telephone ringer back in the days when phones actually rang before they tweeted. And the body is going to be red floss and peacock. And the wings are going to be Whiting Soft Hackle or question mark. And Whiting Soft Hackle for the wings. That'll be interesting. Hackle is brown, furnace, badger, or whatever. Again, the question mark. And thread. Well, let's take a quick look over at the materials. And I gotta have a mess right here. And that's because I have this great big thing with all these little deals here with all the different gyrations that I went through in preparing for this pattern that you're going to see tonight. Quickly, I'll just go through the materials. I got hackle here. I'm just going to put that over at the workstation. I've got the wire. It's from a telephone ringer. You've not seen a telephone ringer before. That's how phones used to ring back in the old days. And that's also some of the greatest wire for.
That's great wire.
Great wire for ribbing and so forth. This is the stuff that I wanted to get to. Let me take my floss and my thread, and I'll set that over at the workstation. And let's get that out of the way. All right. Now, I know that the original dry fly spruce had a calf tail wing. Well, I mean, I got lots of calf tail, but remember, our plan is to make do with what we got, not what we wished we had. Well, I know we've got lots of calf tail, but let's say you don't. Let's say all you have is in fact, let me put this in the vise real quick, then we're going to come back. Let me grab this package and come back to the full shot. Let's say all you've got is some of this, and this is Whiting Farms Soft Hackle with Chickabou. And we're going to tie dry flies out of that. Well, you have to do something to it first before you tie dry flies out of it, because this stuff is made to sink like a rock. So what we do is we use this stuff right here. It's called Kiwi Camp Dry. And the reason I'm not holding the Scotch Guard up, which is another product that does the same thing, it waterproofs clothing, for lack of better things, or whatever else you put it on. But the Kiwi Camp Dry I'm using tonight because we have a couple of folks from Kiwi land or close to it. I mean, down in the other end of the world, and that's Paul and Dawn. But anyway, so I use Kiwi Camp Dry to spray down this pelt. It now won't sink. None of the feathers will, and I'll continue to use those feathers in place of regular dry fly type stuff. Let me set that aside because I want to go to this fly right here. Now that is one just done with Chickabou. Boy, I didn't like that. The wing is too long. I just didn't like the way the Chickabou reacted. So I set that aside. I said, no, that's not quite what I want to do. So I'll throw that one away.
Good thing it was snowy.
So-
You had lots of time to spend
I had
down
lots
here.
of time. I was either shoveling snow or tying flies. So I tried using the treated as divided wings. Well, that was a little bit better, but I still didn't like it. It just wasn't quite right. So we'll set that aside. I said, well, shoot, here's an idea. I have this full sheepskin, and it's well, anyway, you can see what it looks like. And I hosed it down with Kiwi Camp Dry, and it took 2 days to dry it. This thing is absolutely waterproof now. Will not sink for anything. And what you have to do is take a comb and a hair dryer or something like that. And while it's blowing the warm air, just comb this out, and it comes out pretty nice. And I'll set that aside for a moment. And this is what it will comb out like. And it, that can make it into some pretty nice wings. And let's take a look at one of those flies. I'll put this one into, and it still wasn't quite what I wanted, but it was getting there. But
It'd make a nice trude wing, I think. more
yeah,
than
I think it'd make a
divided.
better trude wing than it does divided up wings. But anyway, so we'll set that aside. But I thought, well, that was way too heavy of a wing. So I'd try it with a not quite as heavy wing. And that was pretty good, but still, it just didn't ring my fancy. So I will set that aside. I went back to the soft hackle with Chickabou. I went into the soft hackle feathers. And I had this grand idea that I could take one of those soft hackle feathers and do a built wing. And that's kind of it's a type of built wing that in fact was developed by a fellow in Southern California, and for the life of me, I can't remember his name right now. But that still didn't quite ring my fancy. So I thought, well, maybe I could take and treat it like calftail and tie some divided wings out of the soft hackle feather that's been treated to be waterproof. And that's what I settled on. I said, I like that. That's exactly what I'm going to do. And in fact, our roadmap fly tonight happens to be this one right here. And that's just wings made out of soft hackle feathers. And we're going to have to use some processes different than what we have in the past. And one of the things that I had a bit of a time with this, because the fibers on soft hackle are really great for being soft hackles. But boy, I'll tell you what, in tying a size 12 fly for you all, getting fibers long enough to do the job was a real pain. But I figured out a way to make that work as well.
As soft, how were they to post?
That's the whole thing. Keeping the tips even. They would realign those tips if you weren't even in the room. They'd do it. It was less than fun. Anyway.
But you've got it figured out. Huh?
I did figure it out. And it comes from our good friend Barry Webster in Texas. He sent us this tip recently when he did a presentation for us. And I want you to see that I just took a Post-it note. And this is the sticky edge of the Post-it note. Well, what I'm going to do is just take and kind of fold that over a little bit. Take this fly temporarily out of the vise and put this piece of paper in the vise. And why don't you go to the front camera, Gretch? And see if I can get that in better like that. Yeah, okay. Now what I'm going to do is take this soft hackle feather and get rid of all the fuzz and stuff down at the base end here. Right in this area. And I want you to notice that when we get into this feather here, that these fibers right here, they're pretty dense on the tip right up here, but right in here, it's pretty wispy.
You're not showing. You need to move that.
Oh, okay. Right in this area, the feather has got pretty dense tips, but right here, they're pretty fuzzy or pretty wispy or whatever. Anyway, let's just get rid of all those wispy ones and get down to the ones we want. So what I'm going to do now is take these fibers, pull them off of the feather, and as you can see, they're going to be just a little bit on the short side for a size 12, but we'll make it work. I'm going to pull a bundle of fibers out, even the tips, and stick them on the sticky. Just like that. And that keeps, I want you to notice that what that does is it keeps the tips all lined up here. But that's not enough to do a wing on a size 12. So I better get some more fibers here and I'll just pull them out. And I'm going to see if I can get lucky and set them right up on top. Yep, that worked out. And so what I'm going to do now is set that aside. I've got my wings temporarily kind of pre-stacked, if you will. My wings pre-stacked. So I'm just going to set that aside and put a hook in the vise. And I'll get my red floss. I'm going to start with red floss, even though it's normally tied with black. I'll start with the red. I'll start here at the 1/3 position back from the hook eye and wrap part of the way to the end of the shank and stop. And that's because I'm going to be using, over here in the materials area, I'll be using a Whiting Farms tailing material, and I just want to pull some of that out and bring it back over to the vise. And you know that we always tie hackle fibers on a bear hook. And so that they set the way we want them to set. Not everybody does that, but that seems to work for us. Okay. Now I'll just trim off that waist, and I'll get my copper wire out for the rib. And I already got one cut off and in a clip so I can work with it. And I'm just going to put that on the underside of the hook and pull down on the strand as I wrap towards the end of the shank. And that puts my ribbing wire right on the bottom. Now I'm going to come back about, 1/3 of the way of the body area, not the complete shank. And I'm just going to grab one of these one of these pheasant fibers that Gretchen had. That one's too thick. Here's one that's good. And I'll trim off some of the sparser part right here and just tie this down. And now I'm going to come forward to right about there and stop. And now it's a good time to switch. To thread. Bring that right back to the 1/3 point. And I'll get my fibers here. Notice that I got them all lined up. Grab a hold of those tips and kind of scrunch them all together. Measure them for length, just like I would on a calf tail wing, except this is fibers from the soft hackle.
Now you treated that, correct, before you,
I treated it with camp dryer, and it's been drying for a couple days. And
okay.
I got some fibers that moved on me. These are a bit of a pain sometimes. There we go. That's a little bit better. All right. Trim off the waist. Wrap back. Cover over the area there that's going to be covered by the peacock. Stand my wings up. And now I want to divide those fibers, just as if I were working with a calf tail, except this is now waterproofed soft hackle.
Does that make it a little stronger too?
I can't tell you. It smells worse, and it takes several days for the smell to go away. That's all I can tell you. All right. Looking pretty good. Now I'm going to wrap my peacock the rest of my body. I've got a fiber from my wing that's right back there in my body area. I'm going to try to get rid of it. I did, got lucky. Now I can wrap my peacock. Otherwise, I was going to try to use the wrap peacock to cover it up, but now I don't need to do that. I'll do that over. And tie that off. A couple of turns of thread. Break it off. Now I'm going to reverse wrap my rib coming forward with that copper wire. coming right through the peacock, all the way to the area with the hackle platform behind the wings. Trim off the waist, set that aside for another fly. Now it's time to get out one of the hackles. And I've already pre-sized some hackles, and I'll just grab one of them here. And tie it in place, getting ready to wrap it. I want you to notice that I'm leaving a little bit of bare stem there so that I don't get wild fibers, hackle fibers pointing towards the back of the hook. And I'll trim off the stem there just a little bit and wrap a thread base hackle platform, if you will, in front of the wing. And then I'm going to leave my thread hanging right there in front of the wing. We're going to use the weight of the bobbin, the Dutch Bachman trick that he shared with us here a while back, to actually keep those hackle turns from slipping and leaving spaces in front. And we'll just let the bobbin hold that there. It gives me a little bit of space. Now I'm going to pull that back and wrap a thread head. And I'm going to reach into my tools and grab a whip finish tool. And let's come back to the vise and tie that off. Grab that into the hook eye, give it a pull. Going back to the tools to put my tool back. And there we are there. Trim off the hackle. Missed it. And there we go with our divided wing dry fly. And that's not calf tail. That's soft hackle off of a soft hackle in Chickabou. Questions?
We've got a comment from Joel. He said to pre-treat feathers, he's found that an alternative to the can spray is to use the Loon Aquel. It soaks in and dries well.
Oh, good. You said Loon Aquel. Is that right, Joel?
Aquel, yeah.
Okay. All right, cool. I've never heard of it, but there's so many new products out there that it's reasons like people like you getting together with us all that know about all this to bring it to our attention.
Also, hairline watershed is another waterproof treatment. I'll just throw that in. Okay, go ahead.
So my question is, why did you not try to stack those fibers? Will they not stack because they are fibers?
Chuck, we have a thing called sharing, and when you figure it out, you will get top billing. I'll set the whole hour aside just for you to stack those fibers.
Okay.
Trust me, being in a hair wing tire who has stacked thousands and thousands of wings, it don't work.
Okay, that's all I need to hear.
It was fun sitting next to him while he was trying all the stuff. Well, that didn't work.
Yeah, there were several things that didn't work. I mean, I was at one point said, you know what, I think I'll just put calf tail wings on it and let it go with that. But that wouldn't have been keeping up with what we're trying to do, which is give you ideas of, things that you could do to make do with what you don't have. Let's say on that pattern, you could have done poly wings, but we've got a whole book on poly, so that wasn't going to be adding a whole heck of a lot for you. But I don't think you probably have seen very many soft tackle dry fly wings. And just before we leave this fly, that's a size 12. Actually, with those fibers, it's a lot easier to tie, and that's a 16. 16s and 18s are a piece of cake when you're using those particular fibers for the wing.
That looks nice.
Makes a real nice wing. It's a lot easier, and you can just one bundle of fibers off of the stem go straight to the hook instead of having to try to stack them, because I had to do multiple stacks of for the size 12. On a 16, you don't have to.
So we need to go to tips.
Tips now, I would think, yes. Okay. Well, and as I said, The tips tonight are going to be tips that we're going to be sharing that came from all of you, and they're going to be sort of a repeat. Well, sort of a repeat. You'll see what, well, we're going to take it just a step further. When we go to, these are the tips. Last week or maybe 2 weeks ago, Chuck Ballard talked about desktop organizers for tools. There they are, Ballard's Organizer. It can be laid horizontally or vertically to do the job. Rick Flink told us about the boxes there on the upper right that he uses for beads. Notice that the bead boxes, if you will, the little bitty boxes, are in groups of 4. It makes them easier to hang on to. But the thing that I really wanted to focus on was Jim's mag clips. And it's funny, but those look just like Joel's clips that he told us about in Branson and that we shared with all of you recently. And I can tell you, having watched several Zoom presentations of late, some other people must have discovered them as well because they're showing up all over the place. Well, what happened to me at the Boise show is a fellow that I've known for quite some time that's from the Weiser, Idaho club, about 60 miles from here, walked up and said, "Hey, Al, good to see you again." We chatted for a while. And he says, "Boy, those things would make really great hackle pliers." And I had thought the same thing myself, and I said, "No, there's no darn way that they'll hold a feather." And I just promptly set it aside. Well, I'm here to share with you tonight. We're going to show you whether they make hackle pliers or not. In fact, you're going to be surprised. You may want to buy a bunch of them just for hackle pliers. Now, let's go back. All right, now here is a hackle that I've already just pre-selected, and it's in one of the magnetic arms for, I think they're called art arms or some darn thing. It doesn't make any difference what they're called. The fact of the matter is they work really well for displaying items, and they're great hackle pliers, as you'll see here in just a second. Let me tie that feather on here real quick. All right. All right, now we'll just take and grab that hackle with the pliers, and I'm going to start wrapping. And there we go. Just very nicely wrapping hackle. The only thing I can tell you that I found out, and I just messed it up just now, is it pulled out. If you do not get it in the center of the pinch, if you will, if you don't get that in the center, it will come loose. But there you've got it. For tonight's tip is hackle pliers that come by the dozen. Now here's the real kicker. Let's go back to this for just a moment. Jim's mag clips. But I want to share something with you, and I'm going to do it right now, is put it into the chat. And what it is hyperlinks to all this stuff. One of the things I found in cruising through Amazon earlier this week is that for the same money, I could get a box of ones in a silver box of 15 instead of 12. So the deal is what I'm posting right now in the chat, and it's there now. You go take a look, you'll find some hyperlinks there, and one of them is to the Jim's magnet clamp, and there's a deal of 15 for the price of 12, and there's a hyperlink there for you. So go there and have fun with it. And the organizer box and the bead boxes is there too for your information if you want it. For now, it's time in our presentation for sharing on BTs, and we're going to start tonight like we always do.
I do.
Okay, Evelyn, there you can do the artwork.
Okay.
Okay, there's Gretchen's fly. Looking
There's
good.
Gretchen's
Thank
fly.
you, Evelyn. Oh, wow.
Oh, the lighting is horrible.
She put the dots on there. Look at.
She's got the dots and everything. Yep, church window feathers and everything.
And Oh, and here's the other one.
Very good. And we thank you.
Oh,
Thank
you're
you so
welcome.
much.
Yeah, well, this is a box, and these are all cone heads. And what it is it comes in a plastic tray, and if you go to a craft warehouse and you go into their section where they have their beads, they've got all sorts of these little containers. I also found these little rounder ones with a plastic lid on them at craft warehouse, but they seem to fit into these real easy. And you get the right size. And then I've also included the label you can see the label there that gives the color and the size of it. And they just fit right in there, and it makes it real easy to see rather than having into a larger container where you have to flip through and have all the individual sacks. So they're just another way of organizing, and it's got lids that fit tight so that you don't get them all over the floor.
Okay, here we have two people joining us from Port Macquarie, Australia, Paul Fidelis and Don Hopkins. And earlier this week, Paul sent me a recipe for a really good looking cake. I haven't fixed it yet. Well, it turns out that Don got that recipe from a relative
Who is the chef?
who is a chef. So my thanks to you both for sending us a cake recipe. We'll be testing it out, but we won't be doing it on a large veranda like you were talking about, Paul. We just have a small space too by the pond. Anyway, you guys, thank you so much for joining us and for sending the recipe. We don't just tie flies here. We do gardening, and we may even start throwing some cooking in. Who knows?
Cooking would be good.
Well, everyone, we've had a great time this evening with all of you on Fly Tying Friday with the Beattys. Please join us again next Friday. But for now, it's a wrap. We'll see you next Friday.